to allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Now, what I'd like to do.
I think microphone. There you go.
So what I'd like to do is just do a quick around the room and everybody introduce yourselves. We have a few new faces. So Paul, if you would go first as our new representative from council and go from there.
Sure. Thank you, Rich. My name is Paul Gutenberg. I'm the newly elected councilman from Ward 1. I live over on Prospect Street. Was assigned to this committee by the mayor and the council at Tuesday's regular meeting, and I'm really excited to be part of to be part of this commission. I'm looking forward to it and meeting all of you and then hearing about what we're going to start doing together today. So thank you.
Welcome.
And I'm Shannon Wang. I am the chair of the Arts Work Group, which is under People Play to Beautiful, as well as the Beautification Commission. And I own Shop 53 and Bird City Records right here in town, and have been involved in almost all of the art things that have been happening, murals and such.
And I apologize. And your committee's been working on the firehouse.
Yeah,
stuff as well.
yep.
Okay.
Morning, I'm Don Dooley. I'm the recently appointed Director of Community or Planning Director for the town of La Plata. Look forward to working with you all. I will be taking over as the staff liaison to the commission after this meeting from Kelly. So you'll be hearing from me and we'll be working together in the future. A little bit of background about me is I've been in planning for about 35 years. My specialization is in historic preservation. I have a master's degree in historic preservation from Goucher College, and it's outside Baltimore. I've worked with historic resources commissions before for many years. I've also done numerous types of preservation projects, both as volunteer and as professionally in my career. As well, and I think this is probably one of the most fun parts of my job that I enjoy doing. So I'll be looking forward to working with you and your ideas and how we promote preservation in the town. So.
Awesome. My name's Rich Gilpin, so chair for Historic Preservation Commission. I've been at this for, I guess, it's second year doing that. I've been on the commission for since we really got it started, but for 6 years or so, I guess, since we got restarted. Mm-hmm. And for those who are unfamiliar, we have several projects going on. You'll hear about all of them today, but we have the train station museum that's open and operating. Our next open date is the 24th of May. So if you want to jot that on your calendars. We also have a plaque program that Mary Beth will talk about in great length in terms of identifying historic spots that are worthy of continued observance and recognition. And we are also working on establishing a new museum at the site of the original fire station. And that's our next big project that we're trying to pursue. And we'll talk a lot about that today. So anyway, just welcome to all the new folks and new faces. This is terrific. And I'm going to send around a little attendance sheet here so I get your contact information, names, email addresses, and all that so that I stay in touch. And welcome. I didn't realize you were taking this job. Kelly, we're going to miss you, I guess, if you're not going to be doing this anymore. Oh, good. I'll track you down. Yeah, okay, fair enough. Let's try to put name, phone, email address. Okay, Ron.
I'm Ron Rosenthal. I'm a volunteer, and I've been heading up the planning for the renovation of the firehouse. And so today's a pretty big day because we've made some headway. Thanks.
I'm Steve Shagan with the fire department, and I've just been kind of assisting the committee with the Firehouse Town Museum.
Stuart Bowling, member of the Historic Preservation Commission, vice chair. My big interests at the moment are the train station museum and helping get the firehouse museum up and running.
I'm Kathy Quimby. I'm sort of a guest here, not on the commission, but I'm working with Mary Beth on the plaque project that's proposed.
Mary Beth Chandler, member of the Historic Preservation Commission.
Everybody on this team is very modest. Sending around an attendance thing, so if you guys could all fill that in, I appreciate it. So what I'm going to do is kind of work off the last agenda because we didn't get one printed in time for today. But the things we're going to talk about are kind of similar, and we'll run through it. We don't have minutes yet, I presume, from the last meeting. Right? Okay, so we'll defer that. We'll do two of them the next time. What I'd like to do is go through our normal work group report, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with Ron talking to us about what's going on with the firehouse and the report that we got from the architect on what it's going to take to do this project. And I'm purposely doing that first, so the folks who are here just to hear that part, you don't have to listen to the rest. So you can go, or you can stay if you want to. Love to have you here. So Ron, hand the floor to you.
Oh, thanks. And are you going to use those slides up there? You can flip them?
Lawrence will change, just let Lawrence know when you want to change the slides.
Okay, that's great.
Next
So,
page is the general.
Yeah, and the guy behind the screen is Lawrence. He's our new town clerk. Is that his official title?
Yep.
Welcome, Lawrence. Okay, so anyway, we're glad he's
so guy behind the
the
curtain.
guy behind the curtain doing all the magic. Okay.
We have
So-
Jane coming in.
So, since our last meeting, there's some new people here, and I'll take some time to really set the backgrounds to those who haven't heard everything. But, we finally got to a point where we have some real information to share, and there's still a tremendous amount of work to do. But hopefully during the discussion today, everybody will get to the point where we have, I'll say, a plan forward. I have it on. You can't hear me? How about that? It's just me. Okay, so could you go to the first slide? Okay, so for those, everybody knows pretty much the history of the firehouse. It was built in the time around 1929 after the first tornado. In fact, we had a tour of it, and it was great because while we were touring it, I forgot who it was, but one of you's father was in a picture that was hanging on the floor, on the wall. I thought,
Yeah, a lot of us have family in those pictures.
there you go. So it was
Yeah,
a treat.
grandfathers.
Tour the building. After, I guess in the original part of the building, it was actually a two-story building for the firehouse. But there was a lean-to next to it, which housed two field trucks. And then in about 1992, that lean-to was replaced with a cinder block structure that is there today. Which the report that I pulled from said 1972, but it was actually 1992. And the reason I knew this is that the fire chief was able to correct it. And since then, if you go to the structure today, it's been repainted red. There's a wonderful garden behind it. And I know that the gardening committee, I guess the gardening commission, is it the beautification commission?
Garden Club. I'm waiting to see where the sentence goes. There's a lot of people in.
Who owns the garden?
Who owns the
They
garden?
created a memorial garden in the back. Okay.
Can you, Mike, Mike.
At first, we were working with the fire department, and they just let us do whatever we wanted to do. In the middle of putting this garden together, that property went back to the town. So then we were working with the town, but
Okay.
the Play Garden Club maintains that garden. Mhm.
And then part of that, the pollinator garden that's right, has been installed, was installed by Chris Wagnon from the Keep It Play Beautiful.
Also, I want to point out beautification and garden club get conflated a lot of times when we're having our discussion. They are two separate groups.
I'll vouch for that.
May I ask a question? When you talk about the single-story addition to house field trucks, was the what we now call EMS or the rescue squad, was it ever housed in that building?
That was rebuilt to house our brush trucks.
Okay.
The single-story lean-to type structure, wood frame, whatever you want to call it. It was originally built when the EMS, the rescue squad.
Let's start, okay.
So they put the ambulance in that building
Okay.
until they built the building and turned it out.
Okay,
which
thank
was,
you.
I think in the 60s.
Okay. So going to the next slide, and here's where we start getting into the meat. What we really, our goal is to work with the beautification commission and renovate the entire two-story structure and the one-story structure into a complete addition for the town of La Plata. So let's go to the next one, next slide. And so the first thing we wanted to do is we needed to have a feasibility study completed. The town hired Lisa Holmes through her company, the LD Homes Architect Corporation. And they just completed the feasibility study, submitted the report, submitted slides, and submitted what I will call her cost estimate based on the information she was able to garner. But it's not ready to be submitted for a budget or anything like that, but it gives us a framework to work from. And that's where the meat of our activities are going to start now, is looking through that, making choices of what things we want to fix, how we want to do it, and what kind of phases do we want to make, and how do we want to get the funding, what we deem is the appropriate funding rather than the cost estimate that you provided. Because there's a lot of, I would say, decisions that have to be made before you actually come to the town and say, we need that money. But she did address, and it was good. I mean, she looked at zoning codes. She looked at the building codes. She looked at the Disability Act and all the requirements that would be needed for use. And then actually looked at additional work required, like the environmental. She did inspections, et cetera, that gave her understanding of some of the work that would have to be addressed. She saw a significant amount of mold, specifically in the one-story section, that would have to be really corrected. And then one of the things that we spent some time with her on is discussions on, because of ADA, the egress of coming in and out of the building. And what do we have to do versus what we can actually bypass because of some of the things that she was able to uncover when she was doing this study. A very simple one would be the one that she brought up was like, since, as you know, in today's modern museums, et cetera, they have elevator access. They worry about visibility and going to the second floor. And we had long discussions with her about what could we do in lieu of putting in an elevator, which would reduce cost significantly. So let's go to the next slide. So the first thing that we want to bring up is that the two sides of the building have significantly different requirements. The one story, which the Beautification Commission has wanted to turn into, I'll call it a hall
It's a
for
community room.
use.
It's listed here as
multi-purpose
community
use.
room. the community room.
Event
I'm sorry?
space.
It's listed in the feasibility study as community room. So if we
Yeah.
just talk about it in the same terms, then we don't have to
Okay.
translate.
Yeah.
So
But that, we really need to sit down with you. You need to take the lead and understand what you really want to do, what you want to accomplish, and how you want to fund it. And then on the other side, we could, because of what Lisa was able to find, we could do a soft opening. A soft opening, which doesn't take much effort at all. And we would have to sit down with Steve and the volunteer fire department to see how much of the work can be done by volunteers versus actually hiring people to do the minimal amount of work that we would need to reopen the Firehouse Museum. Knowing full well that the entire plan should be multi-phased. Maybe it becomes just 2 phases, one with the soft opening that we open in the firehouse on certain days of the year when there's something going on in town, like we do with the train station. But then if we want to make it more long-term, if we use the access and need to have the bathroom facilities, et cetera, that would come into the single story and have them connected and meet all the ADA requirements that would be required, that would come at a later date, and we'd have to have a real plan to do that.
So Ron, could I pursue the first bullet just a moment? I want to make sure we're clear with each other on how this is going to play out. Because as this evolves, it started with you guys went first actually and started working on the community room. We got involved in it and kind of jumped into it. I see this evolving as a project with our joint interest in it, right?
Great.
Because at the end of the day, when we get around to building a budget proposal and all that, it'll probably turn into one budget proposal for Paul to figure out and how they want to deal with it. We will together, because it's funny. We could sit here and say, "Oh, that's her problem. You fund that, and I fund this." I don't want to have those conversations because it's one thing that needs to get funded. For example, the bathroom is on the side of the building with the community room.
Right.
Well, we have to have access to the bathroom. And get down to fundamentals. You got to have access to the bathroom when the museum is open. So we both care about it, and it doesn't really matter whose label is on it in terms of a budget. So what we do want to make sure is that we jointly understand where we're going, that we're both aligned, and if there's anything that we need to address, then we capture those things. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. So I just wanted to make that clear to everybody, and especially for the folks that are going to be our liaisons here. And for Paul, because someday he's going to see something from us, we're going to ask for things, and I want you to understand how we're approaching it.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
No, that's good. I'm glad you clarified that. When we get into the details, it's conceivable that the firehouse could be open for soft openings. And we can certainly call it the La Plata Town Museum, so that it's the entire building and not just a firehouse. But it could conceivably be done by November if we get aggressive and we get the volunteer work that needs to be done, and we can get a small amount of money that would be used for materials without going into the details today. The longer term, I think Rich hit it right, and we have to present it as a full plan. That would be in phases. And I don't know if that's a phase 1, phase 2, or if it's multiple phases, depending on the strategy we use for funding.
So I'm going to try to push it a little further. Why not? So in terms of this year's budget, you guys are finalizing that. The Historic Preservation Commission currently gets about $5,000 a year to operate. We run the other museum and other things. And all our other business is covered by that amount of money. That's working fine. What I'm looking towards here is potentially a like amount of dollars, $5,000, that we could use this year to get us to the soft opening thing. Whether it's enough or not, we'll see. But if depending on how we approach it, it could well be enough. But I'm looking for some kind of a line in the new budget you guys are working on now to help us get started, so we don't lose a year waiting on that.
So the 8,100 that you estimated is what went forward.
then that's fine. Never mind. Don't change your mind. I meant 81, not 5. That's awesome. Okay, so that's perfect.
But just for clarity, was that, because we're all getting up to speed, as you know, on this very quickly. In previous years, it was 5K. This year, the ask was 8,100, and it was for the kind of purpose you just described.
On a
8,100.
one-term basis, and
Yeah.
then it's reverting to 5,000. So
That's fine.
Yeah.
But so we asked for 8,100 total?
that was what you requested. Yeah.
Okay, so
For the train and the firehouse?
That was for historic preservation.
Oh,
That's
just
for the whole
like-
committee.
oh, okay.
So. All right, so
Yeah.
we'll have to see if we can make that work. Because
Yeah, so that's really helpful to know as you know, next week, we're really getting into the
That's why-
the
that's why I'm
detail of
bringing
this.
that now.
No, so I really appreciate you bringing that up because that allows me to help, defend that for the
So
understood
let me
purpose.
follow that up because this is pushing it faster than I thought. That's why Steve's here. Once we know what funding is available, or we can assume that we're going to get a certain amount, I'd like to get Steve and the Volunteer Fire Association, along with whoever else wants to join us, including Lisa Holmes, to go in with the understanding is we want to target a soft opening. And if you look at the details, what I'm thinking of is trivially, I mean, if you look at the least minimum, it takes cleaning up on the 2-story portion. There's a bigger challenge on the 1-story portion, and there's a cinder block wall between the 2 buildings. So we can, in the interim, look at just the 2-story portion. What it would take to clean up, we would have to decide if we want to open up the top floor with displays, but it would take an environmental change. If the air conditioner up there now isn't working, we'd have to, Lisa talked about grinding the floor and painting it with an epoxy and then painting the entire interior of the building. One side only, because we'd have to wait till the mold and everything else is done on the other side.
Mhm.
So we could do that as a pretty rapid phase, depending on the availability of resources. And then we would have to get a real list of the expenses or the budget that we would need for the materials, depending on how much is going to be done by paid labor versus volunteer. And we think we could do that pretty quick. The other thing we would want to do while we're talking about that is kind of do a preliminary layout of a first phase for a soft opening with a longer term understanding that there's going to be built out more town historical displays. But in the beginning, we don't have to zero in on that right away. We can just sit there and say, well, is there anything we want to put upstairs? Or do we want to just zero in on some of the historical firehouse information that's there today and that may still be available that we don't know about?
In essence, you're talking about reopening the fire museum. It'll all be called the La Plata Museum, but
Right.
we're looking to reopen what you guys had and getting ready to do that properly, kind of look nice.
And so how do-
Retitling it though, see, the reason we can do that, and this is we're getting into the details. The use permit that existed when they did the firehouse museum is still, it exists today. It was never removed. So we don't have to get a new use permit like you do on the other side of the building, which would take us, I will call it a major effort to really get that completed. So if we just zero in on the 2-story at using the old permit that was used by the volunteer fire department when they were doing it, we can take this very rapid approach.
So that UNO was issued to the volunteer firefighters? Okay, so you would have to operate it to stay under that use and operation, right?
Well, I mean,
I don't know. Why couldn't we expand who would be there during the days that it's open?
The HPC isn't part of the Southern Maryland Firemen's Association. That
so,
liability is on the firemen, right?
well, so what I'd like to do is make this an open question. Maybe we can research this and find out what we have to do. And if we need their help doing that, then we'll look at that.
And if it's a partnership with the Firemen's Association, great.
Yeah.
But that has to be memorialized somehow.
Okay, so we need to figure out what the right answer is. Okay,
Did,
got it.
did the town ever own the building?
We have always owned,
Yeah.
I mean, no, not
No.
always. I take that back. We have not always owned the
Well,
building. But the deed is paid off. That got paid off 2 years ago. So we do own the building.
so, but today, the building is owned by the town of La Plata.
It is.
But the use and occupancy permit was issued to the,
Southern
Firemen's
Maryland Firemen's
Association.
Association.
so the question is, A, is it, maybe it's easy to just transfer it to the town, I don't know. Or if it's not easy to transfer to the town, as is, what do we have to do to be able to use it? In the short term?
Legally.
Legally,
Legally.
absolutely. Yeah, I'm not looking to break any rules here. I
Yeah.
just want whatever
I mean, we
we're
can do a
allowed
lot
to
of
do.
stuff legally, but we want to do it legally.
You know what? None of this is worth stripes uniforms for me,
Yeah. Yeah.
or orange jumpsuits, or whatever the color of the day is. Yeah.
Preservation people don't do well in jail.
No, they don't.
Question, if I may, question, you were talking about some of the cost. As part of the work that the LD Homes architects did,
Yeah.
did they evaluate, is there any issues with lead paint or asbestos? If you're going to be working on walls or floors or cutting things?
Not really asbestos or the building.
Well, that building was renovated prior by the firemen, so that might have been addressed then.
Okay, so I'm just throwing that out because those are real costs
Yeah.
if they haven't been done.
Yeah, we probably should take you in there. The two-story building that, even though it looks like one building, it really is two
This is-
adjacent buildings with a cinder
is,
block wall between the two, and they real major issues. Lisa was describing them on the single-story side.
She did not say anything about concern with lead paint or asbestos,
Right.
to answer the question directly as we can. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist. We may discover something.
She's not an inspector. She's not a building inspector that would go in and be able to legally tell you.
You probably want to do that because if you're touching the walls or you're making any modifications inside the building for a public purpose building, those are things, and even for private folks doing work inside the house, those are things that you want to check out to make sure, because there's going to be a liability.
Yep.
That if that's not addressed and remediated.
Okay.
Yep. So we should bring in a building inspector.
You need to have somebody that's qualified to test. You're going to have to test for lead paint and inspect for asbestos.
Okay.
I suspect there's a possibility, but if there was work that was done in the 90s,
Got it.
then it may not exist anymore.
If there's any lead paint, I would imagine, and there probably is underneath all that red and green and everything in the exterior of the building. There could be some out there.
Yeah, we're not looking to touch outside.
Inside.
If I recall, that building, it had just a block exterior for most of its
Yes.
operation. That
Mhm.
green paint, if I'm not wrong, when Ned was mayor, he talked about using the leftover paint from painting the water tower to paint. And that's a copper-based paint.
Yeah.
To keep the corrosion off of the water tower. So if anything, there's probably copper as opposed to lead underneath the red paint.
I mean, we always questioned why it was green, and that's what we were
Because
told, because
they
it was
had the
leftover
paint.
paint.
Yeah, they had the paint. It's like,
Yeah.
that's
I think my mom was on the council at the time. I'm like, what are y'all doing? It's a firehouse.
Yeah. I saw that and I was like,
Whoa.
a blue firehouse. Okay.
I have a few questions.
Yeah.
Are we ready for questions?
No,
Well,
well, he's got a lot, but go
I
ahead.
got, I got,
No, keep
I'm gonna
going.
go over,
Keep going, please.
let me put the,
Yes.
the numbers up there and then
Yes.
the questions would really kind of flow. Could you
Okay.
go to the next slide? These two slides are not my estimates. These are taken from Lisa's study. And I put the word preliminary on because both Rich and I, when we were discussing it, think that the budgets can be reduced substantially. But it gives us the framework of understanding what we're talking about. So the first grouping she put together was design and permits. And that would have to be done no matter what, but we would have to look at the details along with your commission and really understand is that we really need to do. The second part was for the community room, which had $55,000 number to it. Again, when you look at the details, the devil is in the details, and taking that number at face value is not one we should pay. Okay, then on top of that, she had the ADA options, which were of real interest on both sides of the building. And so for the community room, you can see there's 9 different options, of which I think if you haven't been involved in it and you haven't looked at each of the different options, they're excellent options. Each one has their pros and cons, and she recommended the second one, which was actually going into the rear of the building and cutting a door in the back of the building that takes you to an excellent approach, because you can get from the parking lots, et cetera, through the garden, you can come around to the back of the building, you can go in, and then it doesn't take the amount of work that would be in the front of the building to do it. And you can see that the others do cost quite a bit of money. The simple answer of using the side door that's there today, it doesn't meet code. It's too close to the building next to it, so that's a non-starter. And you'd either have to do something with the front doors, make it like a storefront, or change the entire view of what you're looking at with the 2 metal doors that are there today. But she said a really excellent approach would be to go to the back of the building and make a new opening into the building, and then do minimal to the front. It would also then give you the being able to put in a ramp for ADA, and it would also tie into the bathroom facility that would be right there. So that's why she put all these different options that people have to review and make a decision which one they want to do.
Quick question on the options. Are those options each mutually exclusive? Like it's just one of, there's no scenario where you do multiple?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Each one's mutually exclusive.
Okay.
And then for the museum, which would be the 2-story part, her number was 43,000. And again, when Rich and I were looking through the entire list of all the things that she put in there, most of them we can discount and then zero in on the ones that we want. But that's work to be done to really come up with a number. One of the things, to give you an example, I think if I remember the number, Rich, you're going to have to remind me. It was like close to $10,000 that she had for the heat pumps.
Right. That's all mechanical stuff, yeah.
You know, and Rich and I sat there and said, well, Rich, I'll give him the credit. He said, we should talk to SMECO and see if they'll donate towards whatever we want to do, and actually come up with a theme for the town of La Plata to be able to work with SMECO and have them actually
We are
donate.
We are clearly going to pursue other people's monies for some of these projects. And, you know, SMECO happened to set up a little stand over at the museum over the holiday break. And so I was chatting with the rep there, and I said, and I've since sent them a little paper asking for this, but we wanted all these big companies set aside money for activities like this. And, you know, we not having had the opportunity to talk to them directly about this yet, but the scenario where maybe we get them to chip in for the HVAC and the electrical, and then they call it SMECO's green example of energy savings, might be a path that they might be interested in. If not, we'll have to find others. But clearly, this large project is going to need other people's money. I know what the pressures are on the La Plata budget, and I don't think anyone's going to stand up and say, oh, yeah, we'll pay for all that. I don't expect that to happen. And we'll have to try to get others to engage. There's grant money and other things to pursue as well, and we should do that. But that's what Ron's alluding to here. And I don't want to advertise that beyond the room here, frankly, that we're talking to them about this yet, because it's way too early. But that's a strategy we're taking.
It's a public meeting.
Well,
that's
it's a public
being
meeting.
recorded, so.
Well, you know, when I count on 3 people who look at the recording. So it'll all be fine. But it is what it is. It's a public meeting. I'm okay. But It's premature then for the public and everybody else. It's very premature and nobody's agreed to anything yet, but it's the kind of thing we're pursuing. Okay?
So, so then on the, so then on the ADA requirements for the two-story side, when Lisa put her diagrams together, she came up with this idea because of ADA, we would have to build a ramp on the side door. Where today, if you park at the building to go into the garden, you'll see the side door and it's got a lip. So we would have to build a ramp for wheelchair access and then a ramp inside. When you look at the amount of space that took, it really took off quite a bit of space in the interior of the building. So we sat there and we said, yeah, isn't there another option? And Stuart came up with this wonderful idea that said, well, what if we just lower the floor sill? And she thought it was an excellent idea and she gave us the two options. However, when I went out to the building after she showed me what she was doing, I stood there and she was concerned there would be a water problem, that the street flows towards the building in that corner. And she said, you could get around it by maybe, building some sort of low wall and have a handrail above it, whatever, and then walk around it, or maybe even a French drain type thing. And she said, but if you do a French drain, you have to worry about where you're going to move the water to, because you just can't do it and have it flow into the parking lot next door. You'd have to really work through that. And I walked it and I said, the French drain sounds like the right thing to do. It opens up more space inside, but without having a real expert come in and tell us what we would have to do to make it work. And if it does flow into the parking lot, we would have to work with the owners of the building next door to see if they would even provide that kind of permission. Or can it be drained into the garden area where there's other, none of us are expert enough to know how to do that. And so we would have to do a further study of that with an organization that knows how to do it. So that was the other part. But if the positives of doing the French drain are significant enough to really give it serious thought. So that's where we were with that. So then going on to the next slide, and you see what we were talking about on the soft opening, and my box on the bottom. I can't strive enough to keep understanding these are preliminary, and we really don't know what the cost would be yet. But that list of everything there are the things we would have to consider for a soft opening. And to simplify the soft opening, if we did it when we opened up the bay doors, with that rather than the side door, that takes care of the ADA issue, because the bay doors are street level. So that you can tell she really got into it. I'm really impressed with the amount of work and effort she put into this. But she did it as a very, from her perspective, knowing that this would be a major project that somebody would have to pay for rather than whatever we choose to do and how we would go about it.
I have a question, going back to the thing about the drain and lowering the floor and so forth. And maybe you can refresh my memory because I can't remember. The one-story portion of the building where they want to cut the new door in the back of the building for access, they're also including a ramp there. Does that existing floor already have a grade or a slope to it on the inside, or is it the same situation? It's just a step down that requires a ramp? And because it seems to me the same solution might be possible there, or just lower the entrance and avoid having to install the ramp. But then if you can deal with the drainage issue.
So if we need to send you a copy of a report. It goes into detail on the schematics, and it shows that the door would be designed to be ground level so that you could walk straight in. But the ramp, there is a ramp required inside the building. That would be, you would walk in, there would be a bathroom on the left. And then beyond the bathroom, there would be a ramp into the larger room.
That's only on that side of the building. On the fire side, if we do what we're talking about, it'll be, the grade is level and you can go straight into the floor.
You would have to have two
Why
entrances.
the ramp is there, because if you have the floor, if you do the same thing you want to do on the other corner on the firehouse side and lower the door down to the ground level, and since you're cutting that door anyway into the back, would it be possible to do the same thing there and put that door at the ground level and avoid having
Oh, I
a
see.
ramp coming into the building? That would save you several.
I'm not sure I'm following you because the discussion so far talked about having a locked door between.
No, he's not talking about between the building. He's talking about
In the back.
the one at the second exit out of the other room.
So the one in the back requires a ramp inside. It does require a ramp inside. It's not ground level.
Well, that's the thing.
The present
Back-
door you're speaking of,
Yeah.
present door that's already there.
No, the new door that would be created in the back of the building would walk in at ground level, but then a ramp would have to bring you down into the party area.
Yeah, because the bathrooms are a step up.
That's what I'm missing.
And
Yeah.
That's the piece I'm,
Yeah.
thank you.
You know,
I've been in there a couple times.
I haven't been on the side. of the
I mean,
building.
it's great that you can have the door from the outside walk in ground
Sure.
level,
Yeah.
but then inside you do have the step down.
Right, yeah.
So I do have some concerns about that path in the back. I love the back door entry. That sounds fantastic. But there's all those rocks that are there because we can't build. We can't install anything.
The back there, the reason the back end of that garden is the way it is when the town took the property back. I remember Bill Ekman was the mayor at the time, and there's a great, I'm not going to explain this properly. Stuart, can you explain what's back there, that great big round?
I'm not sure.
It has something to do with the sewer lines that connect, I don't know if it's the Earnshaw building or if it's the building across the street, but that area where that big round concrete top is, at this point, the last I knew, that always had to be accessible. So that's why we went with the river rock around it. Now, that's all I can tell you about
I'd like
that.
to explore that.
That's basically some kind of pipeline, sewer line access point.
That's what I'm trying to
Like
say,
like a
Stuart.
manhole cover. Kind of.
Yeah, a manhole cover, that's what that thing is.
There's one thing we're not talking about that's in the report, and that's the issue of parking.
Hmm.
If you jarred my memory while you were talking about the back door area. If you go back there now, there's a gate that takes you out onto a grassy area before you
Correct.
step into a parking lot,
Mhm.
which is privately owned.
Mhm.
The parking lot that's on the other side of the building, there's two spaces for the firehouse. But there's a parking lot next to it that's privately owned. So there is no parking in the vicinity that's open to public parking.
That's why we always referred to it as a pocket garden, because it was a little garden that's just accessible, but going through somebody else's
So
property.
when we really get serious on the final design, we have to take into consideration what are going to be the parking availability? Where is it going to be? And then how do you approach the building? If it's going to be down the alleyway that's there today, Firehouse Alley, that would mean you'd have to have it clearly marked that you're going to walk around the building to get into the garden area. I mean,
The
into the.
parking area
area.
that is along, let me see, what is that? The west side, where people park to go into the election board and all that. Who owns those parking spaces? Does the town own those parking spaces? Or does the Board of Election Supervisor?
I don't know.
There must be 7 or 8 parking
I don't
spaces.
know if they own the building or they lease it from the property owner because that whole string is one property owner. So we have-
Lisa stated
And
that it's all privately owned parking.
Yeah.
She didn't say who they were.
now, and the property owners there, the Mitchell family, owns the building where the church is. And they own Mitchell Motor Company, so they're pretty boxed in there. And I know they have some health issues going on in that family right now. So how much longer that property will stay in the hands that it's properly in? It's another good question.
No, in any case, purpose of this meeting, we are going to have to resolve the parking thing. And We're going to have to get permission or do something to get adequate parking because there is not adequate parking on the property itself.
Correct.
That's why I brought it up. And that will have a lot to do with this final design of what the exterior looks like.
The application talks to that.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Would that be a concern with the soft opening, the parking? Do we need to resolve that before?
For the soft opening,
Yeah.
I don't think so.
So there's,
Because they asked no.
there's no public parking that we're aware of other than those 2 spaces, correct? In that
I mean,
area.
the soft opening, we'd have to really come up with a strategy for soft opening days.
It does.
I mean, right now, the train station's open
That's huge.
one day a month,
Okay.
during certain months. Maybe that's the same, that would be an option to say that's the same time we open up the firehouse.
Yeah. I don't see it as a problem there because the Board of Election Supervisors is closed on Saturdays,
Saturday.
as well as I don't know of anything going on in the tall Mitchell building, John Mitchell's building on weekends.
It does. become-
Weekends is not a problem.
It does, right. It does become an issue if there's a decision to open up a museum on a
Weekday.
weekday basis. Absolutely.
Didn't Lisa say that there was just some sort of an agreement that they usually have in these situations where you go to the property owner and say, can we use your spaces? And they bless that. That's
And
really all it is.
And on certain days that they probably have no problems with that. But on other days, they may sit there and go, I do have an issue on these days of the week.
And it's unlikely to me.
One property owner too.
Yeah. Yeah, you've got 2 different Mitchell families involved in all that
Right.
back there. So,
So if I can jump in on this, I think it's important to the conversation. From a planning, I'm putting on my planning director hat now on this one. You would have to, I need to look at what the parking
mhm.
code says for this. Rich mentioned that our code apparently has provisions to do reciprocal parking in there. So I want to look at that to figure out the best path forward for this. You're going to have to provide parking if you're changing the use fundamentally to a firehouse or where it was to a museum. You're going to have to provide a certain amount of parking. Now, the thing that worst case scenario is you would go through a variance process for that. And given it's a historic building, I think there's justification that could be made for that. But to try to stay out of the whole public realm of doing a variance, let me explore to see what the code says with regard to reciprocal parking, or maybe if it can be considered legal non-conforming. But usually when you change uses of the building, then all bets are off and the parking has to be up to code. So I will get back to you all on that.
Okay, I got, next slide would be recommendations. So the first one, the most important one, is coordinate with the Beautification Commission. I'm glad you're here today, and you can tell we have quite a bit of work more to do, and we certainly need to do it as a team. The second one is we're recommending to take the 2-phased approach. Once we get into the details with exactly what that phased approach would be, we could say it's more than 2 phases or not. That would be in the final recommendations we come forward with. We definitely have to ensure the use and occupancy permit has remained in force for the 2-story. That was a great question that you asked. Who actually has the use permit? And then that's why Steve's here to ask for their help. The third is we really need to go through the requirement for the ADA accommodations and make decisions of which approach we're going to take with the help of specialists who really can answer some of the tougher questions. We are recommending to put in the entrance behind the building rather than the front. And when you read if you haven't read the report yet, when you go through it, you may come up with a different recommendation. But it kind of stared out at us as probably the easiest way ahead.
Yeah.
And then, and then finally, we had this discussion already, and that's how do we go through the change for the use and occupancy permit for the community room? Because that's all new work. So, and that's pretty much it. What we really do is need to get all of you, we can email it, the actual report, the slides, and the detailed cost estimate. Then we can send it to everybody here with that list. So now questions on anything I didn't touch on.
Okay, one of my first questions is, y'all are referring to it as the Plata Museum,
Town Museum.
the Plata Town Museum. Why are we leaving out the word firehouse?
So actually, I'll paraphrase you. Steve suggested this because if we focus it as the fire museum, we will automatically narrow the interest group that wants to come see it to firemen and people that are interested in just fire stuff. And we're looking for a broader audience. So, because
However-
surprised me with that
however-
thought, and we took it on board. That's why.
But I always like the word but.
But.
I did visit one town
Mhm.
that had a town museum, and they had a pretty nifty sign, which you all designed really well. And in the small border on the bottom, in their historical firehouse.
Yeah,
So when we
Nice.
get into the details,
nice.
we can see how best to title it.
I mean, as long as it's not offending the firemen, that's the main thing. We do not want to offend the firemen.
Yeah, absolutely.
In fact, in that
So we
museum-
put the blame on Steve, is that what you're saying?
See, thanks for trying to keep our relations good.
Did we get that in the?
And what I
record?
liked
Put it
about
on
that
Steve.
one is when I walked into that one, it also had the jail cells in the back of
Back.
it. But it was a town museum.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah, we have a lot of flexibility. If we say that on the site of the original firehouse,
Okay.
or there are things we can do.
Okay. What about the sea grave that is housed in the firehouse? Will that continue to be there or will that be moved?
What?
The what?
Fire engine.
Fire engine.
Oh, the fire engine. Oh,
I hope it stays there.
It's-
So it would stay in the building. Okay.
that's going to be the centerpiece of the thing.
Yeah, that's-
The first
There's a
floor.
lot of historical fire department artifacts in there.
Oh, yeah.
And that, I think the intent is to keep all that. in.
Yeah.
Yes.
Keep the-
Yeah.
The downstairs of that
Mhm.
two-story building will really remain the old firehouse.
Okay.
Exactly.
And then-
Yeah, our garden club actually started out there on that top floor. And that's where we got the bright idea to build this garden. And then we just kind of outgrew it and some people couldn't get up and down the steps.
So
Okay.
you brought up a good thing here. One of the ideas that Lisa proposed for us to consider was because ADA requires that elevator. She said, I'm pretty sure the stairwell and everything is intact, strong enough for people to walk up. So what we can install is a virtual display on the bottom floor, where people who are unable to climb the stairs can get to see all the stuff that we put upstairs. So just like Steve was saying, we can focus the bottom to be firehouse, and then upstairs, expand what we have in the train station in a more detailed understanding of what we would want to put for the entire town upstairs. And then build it out. And people have to really put some thought and effort into how they would want to lay it out. And the other thing is we have to really make sure we take care of the environmental issues, because right now it's very warm.
Mhm.
Gets very warm, very cold. And learn from the train station. the temperature and humidity really affects the display, so we have to worry about that before we start building it out.
Stuff keeps falling off the wall.
Now, this is probably really going out into the, out into left field, but I was wondering about a lift rather than an elevator.
She talked about
Could
that.
a lift
We,
be
we
considered?
talked about it
Okay.
and, there's an expense to that,
Yeah, yeah.
that if it would have to be on the outside.
Yeah. It's not only an expense, there's a risk to the building.
Okay.
So it's in the report.
The
Okay.
concern is.
Send it
If you read the report, you'll see all this stuff is in there
Okay.
and, but we did look at that.
That's
Mhm.
why the virtual approach it was really desirable when she
Now-
said.
And now I kind of understand why it's being instead of just saying the overall firehouse, we're actually having two different things going on there. We're having this
The mold.
community room on this side and the firehouse is staying as it is on this side. Okay. Now, and just a little tidbit, when you brought up SMECO, when we were designing and building the garden, which you'll see on the back plaque, all the contributors we had for that, as well as SMECO. And could be incorrect on this, but the star, the pole that holds the star, that was supplied by SMECO. Now, I don't know if they paid the entire thing for that pole, but they certainly were major contributors when the star went up.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing.
Mhm.
We are preliminarily,
Yeah.
for everybody listening, nothing's done yet,
Mhm,
but we're looking.
mhm, mhm.
We'd have to have people really help us decide how do we approach people to contribute? I mean, because it's not just
I
one.
can tell you how we approached it. We put
So-
together about 50 letters and a 23-cent stamp, and next thing you know, we had this garden.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Yeah, I think we'll get good
Yeah.
support if we go for it. So I'm gonna try to halt the discussion here. What I'd like to do is not an official vote, but I want just a sense of the commission and frankly, all of us that are sitting here.
You were here.
Are we good with this approach? Because we'll have next steps here. We're going to go look at the soft opening details and get to some detail on what it would take to do it. But is everybody on board with what we're looking at doing and the approach we're taking? Are there any concerns? Anybody hard over about it?
And just real quick for the community room, for people that aren't aware, what we had hoped to do with the space was obviously, get it usable and the mold out of there and cleaned up and stuff. Preserve as much wall space as we could for like art openings, perhaps like small concerts, community events of that nature, perhaps meetings, stuff like that. I've also designed a mural for behind the one-story like community area that we're talking about that kind of goes with the garden club. That's all about native plants and things of that nature. So there's been a lot of, thought of creativity things to kind of boost, tourism to that area, the arts thing and everything else. So I just want to make sure
So
that
we
that's.
could
when you-
get around.
I'm sorry. When you look at the report, when you have a chance to read it, you pay attention to the part. It's sort of related to the parking, but it also gets into how many people will be in the building at any one time.
Right,
Because the number of people drives the number of parking spaces.
sure.
So when you think of those uses, how many people are you thinking might be there? Like if we do a little concert or do something? And just kind of put that in your thinking to see if it'll still fit and we can do it.
Yeah.
So, but that's good. All
I
good.
think likewise with the bay doors, because I think those bay doors are probably going to have to go as part of the renovations if we can't, I guess we solved that.
We have a
by
path
The
around
door in
that.
the back, yeah, so I
Right.
guess we're.
But when you said concerts, were you thinking of opening up the bay doors and actually allowing it to go into the street?
If we were allowed to, yeah.
Okay.
And I'm not talking I'm talking like, smaller groups, like, perhaps Island Music, has little bands, stuff like that. Nothing to the extent of, the Friday night concerts here. This is kind of
Okay.
little jam, session.
Now,
Is my kind of intention, not some crazy,
Okay.
party of sorts.
just from the standpoint of the garden club, I can say we'd love to get rid of all that river rock back there. That was a solution for us 20 years ago when we built the garden. But if that foundation could be built up around that manhole, just all be a flat area. I don't know, that sounds sensible to me.
Maybe like decking with a hatch. So you could still make it accessible.
Yes.
Yeah, we'll have to look, see the manhole.
Which, I mean, we had planned to put fencing back there behind the pollinator garden, just so you don't see all that. But maybe that's something that needs to be reconsidered by the garden club. But we can't do anything without the permission of the town. When the firemen owned it, the sky was the limit. But I remember when Paul Ficina poured that slab that the stone is on today, Steve Schroeder came back and said, you know, that's not in compliance with the town code. And we're like, well, are you going to take up the concrete or are you just going to keep going? But of course, that was at the time of the tornado. So, you know, everybody was being more than generous. So whatever y'all want to do back there isn't going to hurt our feelings.
I mean, it's a large enough area to tie it together. It
Mhm.
would really be a.
And I didn't know the idea of the Merle was still alive. So that's still
Yeah.
alive and well for the backside of that building.
Yeah, it's still sitting here on my iPad waiting to happen for sure.
Oh,
Yeah, so-
okay.
And I've talked to members of, I think the fire squad, yeah, I talked to you guys about it, talked to people, a part of the garden club and, someone else just to make sure, hey, we want to do this. Are you guys cool with, this idea? So, and of course, that's later down the road, but I just wanted to make sure since we're all, you know, I just wanted to let you guys know that the intention of that
That's great.
community
Yeah.
area.
Well, can I just ask a question from the standpoint of the garden club? Should we abandon the thought of fencing back there at this time until this is decided or?
And I thought of fencing.
So
You know, where the
talking about-
pollinator garden stopped, we wanted to put fencing there, so we weren't looking at the back of those buildings. I think we even put in for some grant money.
Was it just the building?
HVAC.
I do have an application for a grant from the gardens,
Yeah,
but I haven't looked at it yet. It was to block off the whole building, not just the air conditioners?
I thought it was to block off the whole area, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
I'll have to look.
But we need to, there's no point us sending good money after bad. In other words, if you all are going to put a door back there and decking or whatever we're talking about, there's no point us wasting money.
Yeah, I would hold off on moving in that direction until there's a design in the back. Yeah. That ties the building as a single building.
Yeah, because if there is going to be a path back there, there's no point in putting a fence, right?
Right.
Ultimately, they're going to address the area in some way of whether they can do.
I'll pass that
slab
on.
Or not,
Yeah,
it
yeah.
remains to be seen.
That'll be at the next beautification meeting.
Mhm. Okay.
Okay. All right, look, first of all, excellent. Perfect.
Mhm.
We used our hour. So what I propose to do is a couple of things we still need to cover, if you guys can hang in a little longer. And we'll do those, but I'll try to shorten up the agenda for today and get to these things. But I want to get, first of all, just as a quick update on the train station museum, we're going to be open on the 24th of May. So I need to make sure that people can be there as docents. Bob Curran has already said he'll be there. I don't know, is there anybody else that can be available on the 24th
I'm
to
available.
participate?
I can 10 to 12.
Okay,
I think I can be there for a while.
all right, so
We got
we'll
like
have adequate
around
coverage.
time.
But just make sure it's all on your scopes to be there. The only other thing, I would love, Kelly, to see the flagpole fixed before we open on the 24th. It needs the rope restrung.
I'd love
for
to
the-
see this
For the
flagpole.
town. For the flag. I'm not worried about that flag. That'll be his job. But let me, and for that one, we've been asking for a long time to get that fixed. That'd be really
Same.
cool. And is there anything else on anybody's mind relative to the train, Stuart, especially for you? Is there anything that we need to talk to today?
I'm content with what we've done so far.
Awesome. Okay. What I'd like to do is move next to the, where we are with plaques, and I'm going to give the floor to Mary Beth here because she's done a lot of good work and we can talk about that. And for those who aren't interested in those things, this might be your escape point.
I am interested, Mary Beth, but I do need to go, so I apologize. You probably know I'm already interested, but
Mhm.
thank you, guys.
And thank you so much.
Oh, yeah, of course.
for
Thank
making
you.
it.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys. Thank you. Nice to meet you guys as well.
Okay.
Let's see, we had a subcommittee meeting for the plaques and Kathy was there, Jane was there, myself, and Rich. And we unanimously decided that we want the plaques that, well, to bring you up to date on plaques, there are 12 by 12 bronze plaques on what we consider public buildings here in the town. The Train Station Museum, the original hospital building,
Theater.
Christ Church, the theater, and the old jail.
The willing helpers.
And Willing Helpers is going up. It's been done, but they're not installing it till August. So those are the main ones that we had that we felt were public buildings. So then we wanted to move on for plaques for homes and businesses that are basically the criteria would be that they would be, it's not cast in concrete that they would have to be 100 years old, but we were looking at structures that were 100 years old and based on their age, your architectural design. Is there an importance to the buildings, to the history of the town of La Plata? And are these buildings, they would have to be buildings that are maintained. So we want to do a consistent plaque. I can pass this around for you all to look at. This is a plaque that was done in Rehoboth Beach that they've used for years. This is one that I had International Bronze just draw up a draft for us of what it might look like. And then we have, the question came up about plaques, different plaques for businesses. Well, we've established that we want the plaques to all basically look alike because we want to have these homes and businesses registered here in the town. Now, I don't know who takes care of that type of registration so that when we no longer can put up plaques or we're no longer on these committees, it's carried through. So perhaps you can tell me, Don or Kelly, who that registration of the plaques, what department that would possibly come under?
Well, it'll probably come under me.
Okay, as planning?
I probably need to know more about it.
Yeah.
The plaques being, the way I'm hearing this really has less to do with perhaps the historic significance and just identifying the buildings, their age, is really the criteria, correct?
Yeah, we pretty much have a listing of the buildings and that we're considering, we would only probably do maybe 2 or 3 of these, pass that around for them, of these oval plaques a year. Well, right now we have to look into the company, this International Bronze. Those plaques would cost $349 each. So we certainly wouldn't be doing too many of them in the bronze, but we're going to look into some other companies online to see if we can get something, more reasonably priced. But we just wanted to bring it up to everybody to see how they feel about it. Because one person that's been involved in it, they're not actually on the commission, but they had concerns of plaques for a couple of the businesses to be different from the plaques that are going to go on other buildings. And we felt strongly that everything should be unison. And Martin's gas station was one of them that's a 100-year-old business that's been in the same location. La Plata Mill and Supply is a 100-year-old business that's been in the same location. But we really don't want to treat them any different than any other building. So the very first building here in La Plata is, what is in there now? Beauty shop. It was originally T.R. Farrell's store. So we would probably begin with a building like that, the first one in La Plata, and work through according to dates.
Now, I'm just asking questions because I don't know what the vision is. So you're putting buildings on, or excuse me, you're putting plaques on private buildings is what what I'm
Private
hearing,
business,
correct?
private buildings.
So this would have to obviously be a voluntary type of program that people would have to agree to accept the plaque and to maintain it fundamentally.
Correct.
So we would probably want to establish first of all, establish our criteria of who would be eligible to get them, and then identify a process for how they would make an application, how they would get approval for it. For something like this, it's just kind of identifying either a date or telling a story about the building or the place fantastic because you get that public history out there and people can walk around and really kind of enjoy and understand their environment.
That's
Um,
where the QR
so-
code
so
comes
this is-
in or whatever.
You're a great straight man for what
My
we're doing.
project.
So for every, I used to have a boss who said, for every vision, there's an equal and opposite revision. So, we're engineer geeks. So, but in any case, what we're aiming to do is put QR codes with each of these plaques and create a walking tour of the town.
Well, let me
Spotted
divide that
by-
a little bit more, because we're really talking about two different things that are accomplishing similar goals. The plaque project that Mary Beth's been working on is just identifying and acknowledging, hey, this is an old building and an old place, and we want to.
Yep.
The walking tour QR code thing is hopefully going to be a separate piece where I would like to see set up, I call them kiosks for lack of a better way to describe them. If you envision like the museum exhibits in parks outside where you're walking along and you find a little exhibit where it shows you what's important about that space. We have those scattered throughout the town.
Oh, okay.
Maybe each block or each area where we know we have photographs, a lot of old photographs of the town from like early turn of the century. And this is what it used to look like. That's where I'd like to see the QR codes. The plaques don't necessarily belong to that project, but they would certainly overlap.
There's multiple, we'll call it multiple storytelling
Yes,
that
yeah,
occurs, so that people can understand the place.
yeah. But the
fundamentally.
plaques
The
and
objective is the same.
the
Yeah.
walking tour would be
Yeah,
different from each other.
And these types of things are pretty easy to do.
Mhm.
The commission with the council's blessing we would create some sort of a, registration. Here's, I want to do this. Here's the criteria that you need to meet. If you meet, it would just sort of be it would be an administrative approval to get the plaques. Maybe a subcommittee, of the commission would review these and sign these off. But we could get to the point where staff could ultimately doing it and identify based on the criteria you all established. So yeah, this is done in a lot of communities. It's a great way of identifying buildings and their place in the community. The additional signage out there that you're talking about is also a great way to engage people in there. You're probably familiar with wayside signage as well, that you see these their signboards, storyboards. Usually you go to like a historic site.
Mhm.
These are things you can also do in town to create that sort of vision. And you can do sort of a master plan. I'm thinking of it as doing it sort of a master plan. Is how you might want to approach this for the bigger picture of these types of signs can go on houses or buildings or structures or objects that are, 50 years old or older, or 100 years, whatever you want to choose it to be. And then you can overlap it with other types of tourism signage out there where you could you can tell stories about places that no longer exist or places that currently exist. You can put images out there and almost like an arts and kind of an art in public places type of thing for historical structures. These have costs obviously involved with it, but you can put together like a master plan of different ways of storytelling and identification for historic buildings or vintage buildings in the community. And that could be a fantastic maybe subcommittee project that you think about, and this would certainly play a big role in that.
So that's what came out of our meeting the other day. And I think we also established we would start with businesses, not homes, not private homes at this time, but get maybe the buildings that are on Main Street or Charles Street first, and then work our way into homes at another time.
Now, would these are you envisioning these being put up by who? Who would actually install them?
Well, we'd have to go there and figure that out. Each time we've done one, it's been different. the train station, the commission did, the theater put up their own, the hospital bought the rock and made a bed for the Willing Helpers is putting up theirs, the town put up Christ Church. So we don't have any, we put, well, in conjunction with the county, we put the one on the old jail, but we haven't had any formal format. We really need someone with your expertise to organize us. But we just don't want to take up the time of the whole commission when we can work in a subcommittee form.
Yeah,
And we're not in any hurry to get this off the ground. Right now, we have a signage coming for the schoolhouse that was that'll be on the site of where the tornado struck the original schoolhouse 100 years ago. And that is in the making now. So that's our next biggie to get up.
has the town or the state SHPO done any sort of citywide historic resource evaluation of the town to know where eligible sites are?
Well, to answer that question, back in 2001, it wasn't called a commission then. What was it called, Stuart?
Just
Historic District.
And we put together, you can pass that up and show you, within the committee, we identified houses, the dates of the homes, who were the property owners. I'm thinking there's a third page to that I can't find yet.
This is what that's what your predecessor commission did.
Yes.
Okay. all right.
Which
So
we served on. And then this was done by the town. Now, I don't know when they put that together. There's no date on it. It doesn't say who did it, but that
I want to associate this with the centennial.
with the
for some reason.
centennial,
I think Ace Cravat had something.
Ace
to do with it.
Cravat had something to do with that. So we're just in the formation stage of this. And,
the reason I brought that up is it provides a basis for, trying to identify historic areas in town that might be actually eligible to places that are more public history, informational type of things in there to create sort of a plan of how do we want to identify these things. If the state hasn't done some sort of historic resource survey, it might be something that we want to pursue. And I can certainly make those calls to get started to see where the state is, or maybe they have done something we're not aware of, and try to get identification of our resources out there so that we're all aware of them, which is helpful for me and for the community, is to know what is being identified out there so that we're not potentially losing building structures, object sites that potentially are potentially significant, that the state has already identified that we don't know about.
Yeah.
But that's sort of bigger picture type of thing.
now,
But
when you're talking about the state, are you also referring to the Maryland Historic Trust?
no, I'm
No,
referring to the Maryland State Historic Preservation Office.
Maryland Historic Preservation Office.
Every
Municipal-
state has a what we call a SHPO, State Historic Preservation Office. And they're basically responsible for, among other things, engaging with local communities, helping with their historic preservation programs, providing advice, guidance, but they also do surveys. And it's important that we work with them because they have resources that can help us and can provide additional guidance of things that they might be able to do, grants that are out there. The town at some point, I've glanced through your historic preservation ordinance. In the future, maybe the council, the commission might be interested in pursuing certified local government status. That basically is, there's a process involved with that, but basically the high points are you have to have a historic commission, which you have that. You also need to have a historic resource ordinance that meets SHPO guidelines, and which fundamentally are you have to have an ordinance in place that is is really about preservation and using Secretary of Interior standards and guidelines appropriately, and having a consistent process for survey so that you're actively involved. And some of the benefits of going through that process or being part of this partnership with the state is that every year the state has to allocate 10% of its preservation budget for grants or to help communities that have CLG status. And that allows us to do continuous surveys. It would allow to pay for some of this stuff that we're talking about, including our firehouse, if we follow Secretary of Interior standards and guidelines. So there's money out there that you can unlock through CLG status. It also gives us the ability to have a say in any sort of activity that's going on in La Plata or in the county, in our region that is that somebody is designated for National Register, that we can have a voice and participate in that review process with the state. So there's some benefits to it. There's some work that we would have to commit to in our ordinance and commit to doing from a preservation policy standpoint. So there's lots of really cool things out there to do. And I'm probably telling you more than you possibly need to know at this point or want to know. But this is a fantastic start. I'm really, really happy you guys are doing this. And if the commission wants to appoint a person or persons as a subcommittee that I can engage with and we can work on some of that, happy to do that.
Kind of already exists, right? I mean.
Yeah, it sort of kind of already exists.
Yeah.
Pardon?
Her work group is sort of that subcommittee already.
Oh, okay. All right. So we can talk.
As a subcommittee, we'll get together and just bring
Let's
back
plan
our
that.
thoughts. Okay, perfect.
Now, the subcommittee is how many people? Because if there's more than two, I need to notice meetings. And because that's just,
But it's only you you're on the commission. The rest of your work group is not.
Well, no, Jane is on the commission.
And the others.
No.
Others
Kathy.
following.
Okay. As long as there's no more than two commission members
Okay,
appointed.
that's
that we're
Kathy.
good.
But when we meet, I mean, we can
Yeah.
continue to
We can-
include Kathy.
Yeah. We can reach out. We're going to meet anyway on the 29th
Yeah,
for the tour.
just for an overall, Maryland, two representatives of the Maryland Historic Trust are coming down on Thursday, the 29th, to just do a walk around town, talk about the historic district. We don't even know that that's where we want to go or how it's going to flow, but they're coming down here and taking a little tour with us. A couple of representatives from county government who are also into preservation. Kathy Thompson and Cal Carpenter will be meeting with us, and just a little roundtable discussion and tour of the town. Might go somewhere, might not go anywhere, but we have to begin at the beginning.
What you have described, must we pursue that, or can we keep it more local within come up with our own criteria for the town of La Plata?
You can come up with your criteria so long as it meets the SHPO standards for preservation, which is basically following Secretary of Interior standards and guidelines. These standards and guidelines, are you familiar with what I'm talking about?
I think
No.
so.
You
Okay,
are,
so
Catherine.
So basically, and I'm just going to really try to dash this into a really easy to understand because there's more to it. But basically, when a building structure on a site is evaluated for landmark designation at a state or federal level, there's policy documents or guidelines, standards that are used that identify how to maintain or how to preserve buildings, structures, objects, so that so that their integrity is not impacted. Integrity is the ability for a resource to convey its historic significance. Now, then there's various points in this that, for example, it has to have the 7 aspects of integrity are location, design, setting, feeling, association, materials, and workmanship. When somebody goes out and does an evaluation of a building, they're looking at, one of the things they're looking at is the building retain integrity. And depending on what the resource is or what the important character defining features and aspects of integrity are, the state is going to expect that anybody making, and the building's designated, we'll say, the state's looking for the town as a CLG to uphold those basic standards and preserve integrity. And so sometimes that comes at a cost where an applicant doesn't want to do that because it costs it costs more money to do. But you have to hold those guidelines. Now, we would have to create an ordinance that would go to the state, and the state SHPO would have to approve it as meeting the basic minimum standards to be a CLG, including our ordinance is in line with federal and state guidelines for preservation. So you could incorporate things within our own local ordinance, absolutely. But the fundamental aspects of preservation have to be in there.
Okay, it's a lot to absorb, but
It's
in subcommittee meetings, we can get this going. Yeah.
it's in.
I mean, what
honestly,
my long range goal is that this becomes a standard in the town with the houses, that the town, that our little subcommittee, what we want to do, it's not all going to fall apart in 5 years. That what we're, we started out 24 years ago trying to get a historic district, and here we are, no historic district.
Yeah,
And identifying homes and stuff, so.
Yeah, there's
time.
the thing with historic resource ordinances are that it really depends on the level of commitment and the how much long-term political support you have for the types of ordinances that you want to write. There's ordinances out there that I've worked with, that I've enforced, I've written and done that take preservation very seriously, and there's and there's a process for somebody wants to build an addition to a historic home, they have to go through Historic Resources Commission. Staff reviews it. We might do some additional studies on the work that's done, being proposed, and in addition to other things.
Yeah.
The political side of it and the public policy side of it is that community members may say, hey, I'm for preservation, but this is way too much preservation. I don't want to go down that path.
Right.
And you will get resistance for that, and it'll turn people off on preservation. Sometimes what you do, if you're interested in starting something, is you can create ordinance, and you have a good start to one, but you can incorporate things in there and implement policies that what I would call is soft preservation, things that you're kind of doing already or want to do, or you put the plaques up, you put signage out there, you create identification in the community. And you might even, the town at some point might even want to do grants for doing some preservation work for historic properties, so that you're creating a spirit of awareness, and you're providing some help that you can, but you're not really going the full preservation route because the community may not be ready or want that.
That's
And
what you're saying there. We want to identify,
Yeah.
we want to say, this is wonderful, this building's still standing, you have preserved it, but our goal is not to put restrictions on people.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And that's important to have those types of discussions if you want to take a next step forward, or what it is that you want to do.
Okay.
And I can certainly coach you on those types of
That's
things
what we
with
need.
experience. A lot of communities don't have historic resource ordinances. They don't even have district ordinances. They basically, we may have a district in name, but they really don't really do much with the district, not even plaque it. It's something that exists, but no one sort of is aware of it other than the state and maybe a few people in town. But I look at preservation is more than the idea of, just, creating awareness. It's an economic tool that can be used to bring people into town. And you're bringing people into town on the hook of, of a historic building or site. But heritage tourism is a really big thing in the United States. And you use the preservation as a tool to get people in, but how you're hooking them in is with people are coming in and they want to get lunch afterwards. Maybe they need to get gas. Maybe they want to stay in town and see what else is going on. And so it's a real driver. And a lot of communities, unfortunately, don't know how to connect the dots to take advantage of the economics that are involved in preservation. And so that's why not only does it help us preserve our sense of place and identity, but you can use it for economic advantages of the town.
Thank you. That's a lot, very helpful information, and we will continue to move forward.
Where does that leave us? I saw some information from, I guess it was from the town code, but I don't know if it's a valid code or not, because it was sort of taken out of context, relating to work done by a former commission that doesn't seem to exist anymore, Historic District Commission. And it seems like some of what you were saying about creating restrictions on use and enforcement was already done. It may have been entered into the code at one point. It may not be there anymore. Does anybody know anything about the Historic District Commission?
No, that is in the code, but then it got superseded by the Historic Preservation Commission. So the Historic District Commission isn't working anymore.
Well, does the Historic Preservation Commission take on the role of what the Historic District Commission was given in the code?
I don't believe that was written into the Historic Preservation Commission code.
So
Don
Historic District
Don probably
code-
read that better than I did, though.
Well, here's what I don't know the answer in great detail to comment on at this point. What I can tell you is that the ordinance, oftentimes communities create ordinances for historic districts. And the reason they do that is to maintain with the long-term vision of maintaining the integrity of the district. So that if changes occur, they are consistent with Secretary of Interior standards or guidelines, or what the town deems acceptable in terms of what it wants to review. And typically those reviews have to do with, with the design, the feelings, the settings. So if there's changes, the commission or the town has the ability to provide some regulation to that. And so districts commissions are sometimes created for specific districts, or so you have some oversight to this of your particular districts. You might also create a district ordinance just to try to maintain integrity, so that if somebody's pulling a building permit or wants to make a change, it's codified in the code so the planning staff can enforce it. But it usually ties back to a historic resource study or evaluation that's been done formally, that identifies the important character defining features of the district, identifies contributors and non-contributors of the district, to know which buildings to look out for if somebody is looking to make changes to them.
Okay.
So I would tell you that the commission here today is the overarching for the entire town. So it would incorporate things that the buildings that are already in the district itself. But my cursory look at the ordinance, I need to go back and look at it, so I don't want to speak out of turn. I didn't see anything inherently that provided regulation on the district.
Well, that's what I thought I had seen. That's why I asked the question, because it seemed to me that the Historic District Commission wrote itself into the mix as, well, okay, we're going to be in charge of making sure all of this is done according to the guidelines that we
Right.
laid out. And then that district doesn't exist anymore, or that commission doesn't exist anymore. If we have inherited that, I don't know that any of us are aware if we've inherited that as a commission, that we have also inherited those responsibilities. If that's the case, that's why I'm asking the question.
Well, I will tell you, did jog my memory. There was, and Kelly and I was looking at the ordinance the other day, and there is, in the ordinance, it does reference back the Historic District Commission
Yeah.
and not the Historic Preservation Commission.
Yep.
That I would probably ask our town attorney to pontificate on that, on whether or not the intent is for a Historic Preservation Commission, broadly speaking, regardless of what you call it, is still responsible under the ordinance, or is it just tied to, or do we have to literally interpret that those powers are still being given to a defunct group or commission, or would it naturally evolve into what this commission is as the Historic Preservation Commission?
Or just update the code to.
The code should be updated.
Just change it.
100%, 100%. But in terms of the authority is my question.
Mhm.
Again, I'm not an attorney, but it seems that the intent is a historic commission, whatever you want to call it. I've seen in codes where, old codes that haven't been updated, and this is why we need to do this on a regular basis to the greatest extent possible, where you have positions that are no longer called what they are in the code,
Yeah.
but we still follow them. They might have in the Lada code where it says community development director. Well, right now my title is planning director, but I'm still responsible for the same things, even though the planning director is not codified in the code. Just as an example, it could be.
I mean, if we've inherited the responsibilities that are laid out to the Historic District Commission, we probably need to know and get a crash course on what we're supposed to be doing here, because I don't think any of us are aware.
Well, you have the copy of the ordinance that is online. I would encourage all of us, if we haven't, to read that ordinance so that you can at least familiarize yourself with what the ordinance says and the role that the Historic District Commission had, which I would argue applies to you all as the Historic Preservation Commission, because you become the successor to it. Yeah.
Interesting.
Learn a lot every time we do this. All right. So what I'm going to try to do here is move through the agenda. So just, Paul, for your edification, next time we'll keep you and say, do you have a town council report for us?
Yeah.
I won't do that today.
Well, let me ask you though, just what is what kind of information would you like? Give me a
Whatever
little.
you believe to be relevant in terms of what's going on in the budget process or anything related to this commission. If there's something that you've heard, if you got a question, any of it. There's
Okay.
no rules here. Frankly, the reports we've seen in the past are relatively succinct. And, but it's just a matter of what news is out there, what's going on. So as like next time, if the budget is through by the time we see each other next time, you can tell us how that worked out.
Yeah.
So on, okay? That you can't fail. Similarly, we do a staff report. Yeah,
I'm writing that down. I'm taking that note.
it's public record. You can quote me.
Mr. Gilpin said I can't fail.
Secondly, we'll do a similar thing with staff report, and I'll look at you and say, what do you want to tell us from the staff report?
Sure, absolutely.
Kelly used to do that. And so you would tell us, and that's where I'll harass you about, did anybody fix the flagpole at the museum yet, or whatever's going on at the time? So that's what will happen. And Kelly,
That's-
is there anything you want to tell
That's
us?
also a good time to talk about how much money you have left in the budget and what expenditures,
Yeah.
and any kind of ongoing events in the town or vacancies or just general news that people might want to spread.
Understand.
Because this is part of our whole network. As commissioners, you get more information that you can share with the community.
Yes. Awesome. Okay. Is there any new business or anything that anybody would like to bring up for today's meeting? Hearing none. Unless there's an update, I didn't talk about the tornado stuff yet today on purpose, unless there's something.
Well, nothing really. The
Okay.
only update I have for the train station museum is I've contacted Susan Stiles again about getting that Folks Creek sign She says, oh, yes, I'm still aware of it, but we
Tell
still
her we're having our second
we
opening.
haven't nailed it down yet. So, and I haven't exactly been pushing her too hard about it. So we'll get it straightened out.
Okay. And I do want to get with you about putting together that track thing for the
Yeah.
model. All right. Any other new business, other business, anything?
Maybe one comment just to plant the seed, right? So, you know, considering resident engagement on these issues, right? Is there just an idea, thought that I just wanted to just put out there? We don't have to do anything about it, but one of the things I'd like to do is identify if there are opportunities for small projects, right? Where we can say, like, if there's a need for the data set you talked about as an example of the places on this registry, right? And if it would be helpful for us to say, well, we would really like somebody to put that together in a database or put, you know, present it in a dashboard or some way that we can interact with it in a different way than sort of like a typical thing. Like, these are things we could put out there and maybe invite a high school student who needs a project to get volunteer hours in. And there's probably 10 different examples of this that we could use, but if there's a way we could kind of identify what those are, maybe we can put those out there and try and get some, somebody interact with.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we've
Okay.
had some success.
Yeah.
A couple of volunteers that are sitting here at the table with us are the result of, hey, I'd like to do something.
Yeah.
Plenty to do.
Okay.
So,
And-
yes.
Yeah. And I'd like to help with that too. And just to try and get a wider kind of net of people that we could maybe get interest in helping us out with these things. So.
I think if you had, and I don't know if the commission has a work program, but it would be probably help provide some focus
Mhm.
and would help with budgeting to create a work program of what the commission can do from things that, are going to take longer time to more short-term, medium-term things that can be done.
Mhm.
And we can show some success, put it on our website.
Yeah.
On there, it gives the council something to boast. And, I think we can have a more robust discussion with Mary Beth, with you or a second subcommittee member, if you're interested in that, once we start talking about preservation stuff here and develop for the commission a work program of what we want to do and start refining it and thinking about, and then start asking in the council in future years, this is on our work program. Here's what we want to try to budget for and what we're going to get out of it.
Okay. Yeah. Great. Yeah. I like that. Thank you.
Kelly, do we have the next meeting on the calendar yet?
I
It
don't,
should be around July the 25th.
okay. July 25th?
If there's, I want to see if there's one already posted.
No, there's not.
Okay, then I would propose our next meeting would be July 25th, like 2 months.
Okay.
Okay. Any other information necessary? If not, do I hear a motion?
I motion we adjourn.
Do I hear a second? All in favor? All right. Thank you all very much. We did run long, but boy, we covered a lot. So
You did, yes.
we got a lot of stuff done, so that's great.